There was a lot of hype surrounding this film when it came out. To my recollection, it was the earliest horror movie from my childhood that I can actually remember coming out to theaters. I begged my parents to take me to see it, but did they listen? Of course not, it was rated R.
I'm afraid of heights.
Don't be a pussy.
I guess my dad's philosophy only worked at home. The poster said we saved the best for last, so there was a definite feeling that this would indeed be the final nightmare, despite the Friday the 13th series using Final in one of its earlier films. There was also the hype of this big 3D finale where Freddy's head explodes off the screen. I was psyched, and I even tried using a little psychology on my parents. I was like, come on man, this is the last chance I'm gonna have to see him up on the big screen.
Freddy's dead.
But my parents weren't fooled. They knew, based on the history of other horror franchises, that the word final was simply a gimmick to sell tickets. And you know what? 3 years later, a pretty big gap actually for this series, we got yet another film in the series, with Wes Craven actually directing again. But that one was a little bizarre, and we'll cover it next time. Okay, on to Freddy's Dead, the next two, Final Nightmare. It might interest some to know that this was the first and only film in the series directed by a female, Rachel Talalay, who had been a line producer for most of the prior films. From the opening titles, what does this remind you of? Yeah, they use a rock song to open the movie, kind of like A Nightmare 4. Right off the bat, you can tell they were going back to the campiness of the fourth movie, since Nightmare 5 was a big disappointment. This one is almost like a comedy, though. Some fans hated it because it does have a feeling that they're really not trying to take him seriously here. But personally, I thought it was entertaining as hell.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul, too!
Seeing him on that broomstick, even in the movie's trailers, was a riot. At that point in my life, I was just starting to realize that they could successfully blend comedy with horror. And while I enjoy a jolly good death scene, the comedy made it so much more enjoyable because you didn't have to avert your eyes away from the screen. Yeah, at that age, I'll admit, I was still doing that.
Don't be a pussy.
Anyway, the film opens by telling us that over the past decade, there are almost no kids left on Elm Street because Freddy killed them all. We start off by following a John Doe, supposedly Elm Street's last remaining kid. Freddy lets him live for some unexplained reason.
Now be a good little doggy and go fetch.
But his encounter leaves him with amnesia, as he's simply left to roam the streets of Springwood. John gets taken into a shelter.
Look, do you have any, caffeine pills or coffee, maybe some Coke? I meant the soda.
Where we meet this movie's batch of dead teenagers, a group of urban kids who again have their share of problems. There's Tracy from, surprise surprise, A Broken Family, although her backstory is a little more disturbing than the other Elm Street maidens. We find out that her father, played by Orville Ketchum from the Sorority House Massacre series, I can't believe I'm making that reference, sexually abused her. Then there's Spencer, the dope addict, and Carlos, the one with the hearing aid. Everyone remembers his death scene. The protagonist is Maggie, an orphan who works at the shelter as a social worker, who has haunting dreams about a little girl in red ribbons, and something to do with a water tower. We find out that she is, spoiler alert, Freddy's daughter.
I am your father.
Now I know this came out before Jason Goes to Hell, but still, this is getting so old and so cliché already. It's an unnecessary plot device. But I'll be honest, they at least make an attempt at linking her to his already existing backstory. We find out that Freddy's daughter was taken away from him as a little girl because the town suspected his evil ways. It was that little event that caused Freddy to kill the earlier generation of Elm Street kids, before the parents burned him alive. If Freddy wasn't already born in a loony bin to a bunch of crazy lunatics who raped his mother, this might seem plausible. But we already know Freddy is born into the world evil, so we don't need this extra footnote concerning his oh-so-innocent daughter.
I didn't need a glove to kill your bitch of a mother.
Oh yeah, and apparently Freddy was married too. There's a scene where Freddy flat out kills his wife, but she deserved it. I mean, how insane do you have to be to marry Freddy frickin' Krueger? The story is pretty weak, but there's so much entertainment value here I don't even know where to begin. There's a ton of out-of-place cameos. You have Roseanne and Tom Arnold as some crazy, grief-stricken parents.
Ethel! I want my children back! You know they bring him!
Johnny Depp returns to the series as a spokesperson for anti-drug use.
This is your brain on drugs. Questions?
Yeah! What are you on? Looks like a frying pan and some eggs to me.
And Alice Cooper plays Freddy's dad.
Now it's time to take your medicine.
Actually, that last one makes sense. I think everyone remembers the kills in this one. There aren't a lot of them, and none of them are terribly gruesome. As a matter of fact, they're not even scary. They're hysterical. Of course, everyone remembers the Carlo scene.
Nice hearing from you, Carlos.
And the scene with the power glove. There's even a scene where Freddy encounters, get this, Yaphet Kotto. There's a surprise. I also love the scene with the map in the van. This is scene for scene such an enjoyable movie, even up to the end credits where they give us extensive clips from all the films in the series. It's not scary, it's not gory, and it's definitely not the best in the series, but despite all that, it's entertaining as hell, and that's what makes it pretty memorable. The one downside I will say is the ending sucks. We learn more pointless bulldookie about Freddy's past, such as how he was treated as a kid, and yes, even as a kid he was a demonic little bastard, and the 3D in this one flat out sucks. Remember when we talked about Friday the 13th Part 3, where they were using a new technology to bring audiences a real sense of 3 dimensions? Okay, well, that was 1982, and this was 1991, and they went ahead and used the traditional blue and red 3D that never works. The DVD came with a pair of 3D glasses, and I've never been able to see it in 3D, and I don't have a problem with depth perception, because I can see any modern-day 3D film just fine. The 3D effect in this film flat out sucks, and Freddy deserved better treatment than that. This is the perfect film to watch on Halloween, just because it puts you in the right atmosphere, but it's also a fun film. Again, it isn't the scariest. In fact, out of all the films, it's the least scary, but in terms of its overall appeal, it's highly enjoyable.